The lawyer slid the packet across the table and said my signature was the last step. My brother kept smiling at the buyers like the company was already sold. My parents sat beside him and said nothing. No one asked why the woman who built the software was being pushed out with nothing. He told me to sign fast. He said I was only support. He said Evan carried the name and I worked in the background. Then he called me an employee in front of strangers and acted like that settled everything. I did not argue. I did not plead. I did not touch the pen. I smiled. Then I opened my bag and pulled out one sheet of paper with a federal seal at the top. Not stock papers. Not severance. Not a family agreement. The buyer at the end of the table stopped turning pages. The lawyer beside him leaned forward. My brother finally looked at me. That was the first quiet moment all morning, because the paper in my hand did not ask who wore the title. It only named who owned the source code. And in that room, the sale stopped belonging to my family. 2 words sat at the center of that page. Source code. Not the company name. Not my brother's name. Not my father's signature. Mine. That was the detail nobody in that room was ready for. They thought this meeting was about loyalty, titles, and family hierarchy. It was not. It was about ownership. If that paper was real, then everything my brother had been selling for months was built on a lie. Not a loud lie. A polished one. The kind that sounds solid until someone asks who actually owns the engine under the hood. My brother still looked annoyed, not scared. That told me everything. He thought I had brought emotion into a business room. He still believed he could talk over it, smile through it, and turn me into the difficult daughter one more time. He was wrong. Because once those 2 words landed on that table, the room stopped asking who carried the family name. It started asking the only question that mattered. Who did the company really belong to? And once that question showed up, nobody could hide behind blood, titles, or the old family script anymore. Before I tell you what my brother said next, drop where you're watching from. Then stay with me. Because the moment that buyer read my name on that record, the room changed. Not slowly. Not politely. All at once. And my family still had no idea what was gone. My name is Nora Bennett. I am 32 years old. I live in Frisco, Texas, just north of Dallas. I work as a software architect. And right now I am telling you this because my own family thought the person behind the code did not need a seat at the table. In my family, I was the useful one, not the celebrated one. My older brother Evan got the title, the suits, and the polished introductions. He knew how to shake hands, hold eye contact, and make ordinary numbers sound like vision. My parents loved that. It looked powerful. It looked clean. It looked like success. I was the one in the back room. I wrote the system clients depended on. I fixed crashes before sunrise. I stayed on support calls when warehouses froze and orders would not sync. I handled patches, security, integrations, and the ugly parts nobody claps for. If a customer praised the platform, my father thanked Evan. If revenue went up, my mother said my brother was finally becoming the man he was meant to be. Then she would look at me and say the same thing she had said for years. Your brother needs the spotlight. You are better behind the scenes. That line was supposed to keep me small, quiet, grateful. It did not. I said less as the years went on. I watched more. I kept records. I learned exactly how this family worked. Praise went to the loud one. Pressure went to the reliable one. And every sacrifice was called love if it was taken from me. That is why I was calm in that conference room. Not because I trusted them. Because I already knew what they were going to do. My family believed blood could rewrite ownership. They believed titles could erase authorship. They were wrong. I was not the emotional daughter trying to grab what was his. I was the one who understood the structure better than everyone in that room. And once people like that push too far, they make the mistake I had been waiting for. They stop checking what is written. They start trusting their own version. That was where their real ending quietly began. The company looked bigger from the outside than it really was. Bennett Transit Solutions had a clean logo, a polished website, and enough regional clients to make people in North Texas think we were building something rare. My father loved that part. The image. The parking lot full on weekdays. The glass door with our name in silver letters. My mother loved telling people we were a family success story. What they never described was the room in the back. That room was mine. No window. 2 monitors. A whiteboard full of system maps. A rolling chair that squeaked every time I leaned back. An old navy hoodie on the hook behind the door because the server closet kept that side of the office cold year-round. I spent more time in that room than I did in my own apartment. The platform started as a rough warehouse management tool. Then I rebuilt it. Then I rebuilt it again. Inventory flow. Order sync. Barcode logic. Vendor tracking. Error recovery. Reporting dashboards. Every time a client asked if the system could do one more thing, Evan said yes in the meeting, and I stayed up late making his promise true. That was our family model. He spoke. I built. My parents watched. Then they called that balance. On paper, Evan was Chief Executive Officer. In practice, he knew the pitch deck better than the product. He could say growth, scale, expansion, and strategic path with a straight face. But if a client asked why a shipping queue stalled after midnight or how the API handled duplicate scans, he would look toward my office without turning his head. My father handled relationships. My mother handled image. Evan handled credit. I handled reality. 14-hour days were normal. Saturday calls were normal. Eating takeout over live error logs was normal. I would leave the office after midnight, drive past dark shopping centers on the tollway, and come back before half the staff had opened their laptops. When the system ran clean, nobody mentioned me. When a rollout saved a client account, my brother got congratulated in the conference room. I noticed everything. Who signed what? Who avoided detail? Who kept saying later whenever ownership came up? They thought loyalty meant silence. They thought payroll meant possession. They thought if my name stayed off the website, it stayed off the product. That was the part they never understood. I never confused being useful with being owned. Not once. Ever. That was why, 5 years earlier, I registered the original source code under my own name and locked the certificate away. Not for revenge. For structure. Because deep down, I already knew what this family would do the moment the company became worth real money. The first crack showed up in a due diligence call. It was small, clean, easy to miss if you did not understand what people were really asking. The buyer had a legal team on the screen. Their lead counsel sounded calm, almost bored. She flipped through the packet, paused, then asked one simple question. Who owns the core intellectual property behind the platform? Evan answered too fast. The company does. Obviously. I said nothing. But that one word stayed in the air longer than he realized. Obviously. People who actually understand ownership do not say obviously. They say assignment, registration, work for hire, license chain. They answer with paper, not posture. The attorney asked again. Do you have signed transfer documents from the original developer to the company? Evan smiled like she had insulted him by asking. Nora built it here. She was an employee. It is all internal. Just an employee. There it was. That was the first early payoff. Not because it hurt. Because he had finally said the wrong thing in front of the right people. He thought job title settled authorship. He thought salary erased origin. He thought if he said company enough times, the company became the truth. After the call, my father told me not to read too much into legal language. My mother said outside lawyers always make things sound more dramatic than they are. Evan told me to stay available in case the buyer wanted a technical walkthrough. That part almost made me laugh. They wanted my system. My labor. My credibility. Just not my name. 2 nights later, my parents asked me to come by the house. They said it was dinner. It was not dinner. The papers were already laid out on the kitchen island when I walked in. Waiver. Release. Confirmation of no equity interest. A quiet little package built to make me disappear before the sale closed. My mother pushed the pages closer and said this was best for everyone. My father said families should not nickel and dime each other when real opportunity was on the table. Evan leaned against the counter and said the company could not move forward if I kept making things emotional. Emotional. That word again. I did not sit down right away. I read every page standing up. Then I looked at him and asked one question. Show me where the company got title to the source code. He rolled his eyes. Do not start that. I asked again. Show me. Nobody moved. Nobody answered. That silence told me more than any threat could have. Because from that moment on, I knew they were not just pushing me out. They were trying to clean the paper trail before someone else noticed what they never actually owned. 3 days before the closing, they called me into the conference room for what my father described as one last family conversation. It was not a family conversation. It was an ambush with bottled water and printed packets. My father sat at the head of the table. My mother sat beside him with her hands folded. Evan stood near the screen. He liked height when he wanted control. I stayed near the end of the table and kept my bag on the chair beside me. Evan started talking before I even opened the packet. You are making this harder than it needs to be. I looked at him, then at the papers. If it is simple, read it. He gave a laugh. Nora, do not do this. It is standard paperwork. I slid the top page toward him. Then read it. My mother exhaled. Why are you always like this when something good happens for the family? I ignored that and kept my eyes on Evan. Read the section about intellectual property. He did not touch the page. Dad cut in. You know what it says. Do not turn this into theater. I answered without raising my voice. Then it should be easy to read out loud. That landed. Evan finally sat down, but he did not read the paragraph. He summarized it. It says everything created while you worked here belongs to the company. I shook my head. No. That is what you wanted to say. Read what is written. His jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. I said nothing. He looked at the line again, then skipped half of it. Any software, improvements, systems, tools, and related materials developed during her role with Bennett Transit Solutions shall be considered company property. I leaned forward. During what role? He frowned. What? I repeated it. During what role? He stared at the page too long. My father stepped in. Enough with the word games. This was where bad paper starts to tear. I tapped the second paragraph. Read the next part. Evan did not want to. But he also could not refuse in front of our parents without looking weak. He read slower. The employee affirms that she holds no personal claim, present or past, to the platform architecture, source code, derivative systems, or core software functions currently used by the company. Then he dropped the page. There. Happy. I kept my face still. No. Read the date line. He blinked once. Why? Because dates decide ownership. My mother turned toward me. You are doing exactly what people do when they want to sabotage something bigger than themselves. I looked at her. No. I am doing what people do when they are asked to sign away things that are not theirs to take. That changed the air. Evan leaned both hands on the table. Let me make this very clear. I built this company in the market. I brought in the relationships. I carried the name. You wrote code and got paid. That has always been the deal. I nodded once. Good. Then answer one question. He waited. What document transferred ownership from me to the company? Silence. My father reached for anger. You made that software under this roof. On this payroll. For this family. I did not move. That is not a transfer document. Evan tried to take the room back. Nobody cares about technical distinctions except lawyers. I said it before he could keep going. The buyers do. That hit him. So I pressed again. If this is simple, show me the assignment. He looked at my father. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at me like I had crossed some moral line by being precise. Then Evan made the mistake I needed. He said, we do not need to read every line. We all know what belongs to this company. I sat back. No. Then I gave him the sentence he should have feared from the start. You do not get to decide ownership by saying it faster. After that meeting, they stopped speaking to me like family and started speaking about me like I was a problem. My mother called 2 aunts that night. By morning, one cousin texted that I should not destroy my father's legacy over paperwork. A former office manager left a voicemail about loyalty. One longtime client emailed to ask if I was still with the company because Evan had said I was struggling with change. Social control. They were not trying to prove me wrong. They were trying to make me look unstable before anyone important heard me. In my family, that was the pattern. If the truth could not be buried, then my tone would be questioned. If the paper could not be explained, then my motives would be. I did not answer calls. I did not defend myself in group texts. I pulled old build logs. I matched version histories to rollout dates. I exported email chains where I sent patches from my personal repository before Bennett Transit Solutions even had proper internal storage. I organized time-stamped commits, support archives, server migrations, vendor messages, and the product notes I wrote before the company had its own office. There was no signed assignment. No purchase of the code from me. No work for hire agreement covering the original architecture. No retroactive transfer buried in any onboarding packet. They had salary records and a habit of speaking as if possession was ownership. That works in families. It does not work in law. By Thursday afternoon, the story around me changed again. Now I was not greedy. I was confused. Evan told 2 managers I had spent too much time alone with the system and not enough time understanding business. My mother told a family friend I was brilliant but rigid. My father told a vendor I was exhausted and taking things personally. Not dangerous. Just emotional. Not careful. Just difficult. Not right. Just hurt. They kept shrinking the issue because the real issue would have destroyed their timing. The sale was supposed to close on Monday. Every hour mattered now. And once people get that close to money, they stop cleaning their lies. They just rush them. Procedural control. The company lawyer sent me a revised packet that night with a note saying this version should clear up any remaining concerns. The note was polite. The attachments were not. It did not just ask me to waive equity. It asked me to affirm that every component, module, derivative feature, interface element, and operational logic tied to the platform had always belonged to the company. Past tense. Present tense. Future improvements too. They were not documenting reality. They were trying to manufacture it. I read every line twice. Then I sent back one sentence. Please identify the executed instrument by which Bennett Transit Solutions obtained title to the original source code. 23 minutes later, the lawyer replied. We believe the company has a valid ownership position based on the scope of Ms. Bennett's employment and long-standing internal use. Believe. Position. Use. Because people with title do not answer a direct ownership question with belief. They answer with a signature date or an attached exhibit. He gave me none of that. So there is no signed assignment. He did not answer that question. Instead, he called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was careful. He said everyone was aligned on the commercial intent. He said the buyers did not need unnecessary confusion this late in the process. He said we should avoid injecting technical disputes into what was fundamentally a family business transition. Technical disputes. That was how they were naming authorship now. My father asked me to come in early on Friday. He was in the conference room. So was Evan. So was the lawyer. 3 men. 1 packet. 1 chair left open. I stayed standing. The lawyer spoke first. Nora, I think we can all agree this business has operated for years on a shared understanding. Shared understanding is not title. Evan laughed under his breath. There she goes again. I ignored him. The lawyer shifted. Would it help if we clarified that your contributions were valuable and that the company appreciates your foundational role? Appreciation. Foundational role. Still no ownership document. I pulled the top page toward me and read the signature block. It required me to certify that I had no past, present, or future claim related to the platform or its commercial use. It also required me to confirm that any registrations, filings, or records inconsistent with the company's ownership position were superseded by this agreement. Because you only write a sentence like that when you are scared some record already exists. I looked up. Who drafted this sentence? The lawyer answered. Standard protective language. No. I tapped the line once. This is not standard. This is corrective. Nobody spoke. Mini payoff. Because they froze. My father snapped first. Why are you doing this to us right before closing? I met his eyes. I am not doing anything to you. I am refusing to sign something false. Evan leaned back like he had already decided how the room would remember this. You always do this. You act like being smart makes you the only adult in the room. I answered him the way I answer bad code. Exact. No. I act like words matter when they are written down. The lawyer tried one more angle. He said the buyers were focused on continuity, not internal technical authorship. He said if I created friction now, I might trigger consequences bigger than I understood. Because he was right about one thing. If the buyers saw the gap, the sale would not wobble. It would stop. I asked the question none of them wanted on the record. Are you advising the company to represent full ownership of the platform without a signed assignment from the original author? He did not answer. He stood up, gathered the packet, and said we should all take the weekend to think constructively. Constructively. Another word people use when they mean submit quietly. Level 3 began the moment he walked out. Force structure. The closing was moved from our office to a leased conference suite in Plano because the buyer wanted their counsel there in person. That detail mattered. Outside space. Outside lawyers. Outside process. My mother hated it because she could not manage the room the way she managed dinner. My father hated it because he could not keep things casual. Evan hated it because a real table with real counsel leaves less room for performance. Because structure does not care who gets called ungrateful at Thanksgiving. Over the weekend, I printed what I needed. What could speak in one pass? The federal copyright registration. Repository records. Early architecture notes. Email timestamps. A clean summary of development before any executed transfer. I put each section in order. No highlighting. No arrows. No commentary. Truth looks stronger when it does not decorate itself. Monday morning came cold and bright. I drove to Plano before sunrise and sat in the parking garage. For 6 minutes with the engine off. I was making one last decision. Whether to stop the sale quietly before the meeting. Or let them walk into the room and make the claim themselves. Because some people do not understand truth until structure makes them say the wrong thing out loud. When I walked into the suite, the buyer's team was there. Their counsel had binders open. Their COO had a legal pad. Evan was smiling again. My parents were dressed like they were attending an award ceremony. Our lawyer stood near the coffee service pretending this was still manageable. Then the buyer's counsel looked around the table and said, before we finalize, we need verbal confirmation that the company owns the core software outright. Evan answered before anyone else could breathe. Of course we do. Then he turned to me. And made the mistake. He looked straight at me and said, if you have concerns, say them now. Otherwise stop wasting everybody's time. That was the mistake. Not because it was loud. Because it forced the room to choose between performance and proof. I opened my bag and took out a thin folder. White paper. Federal seal. My name. I slid it to the buyer's counsel. Please read that first. Evan laughed. What is that? I kept my eyes on the attorney. The original copyright registration for the source code this company is trying to sell. The room changed before anybody spoke. He opened the folder. First page. Second page. Attached summary. Registration number. Filing date. Description of the core platform architecture. The COO leaned over. Our lawyers stopped moving. My father tried first. That does not mean anything. She built it for the business. I answered at once. Then show the assignment. He had nothing. My mother sat straighter. Nora, this is still a family matter. No. I looked at her. It stopped being a family matter the second you tried to sell what was never yours. Silence. Not polite silence. Legal silence. The buyer's counsel asked the question that should have been asked months earlier. Has Bennett Transit Solutions ever executed a signed assignment transferring ownership of the original source code from Ms. Bennett to the company? Our lawyer chose his words carefully. The company has operated under the understanding that the software was developed within the scope of her employment. Understanding is not title. I said. It flat. The attorney asked for any signed assignment. Any work for hire document tied to the original build. Any transfer of the registration. Any recorded chain connecting me to the company. Nothing came. Evan stepped in like confidence could cover a gap in paper. This is getting blown out of proportion. She was paid. We built the business around that platform for years. Everybody knows it is ours. I looked at him then. That is not ownership. That is habit. The buyer's CEO cut in. Are you saying the company marketed and operated a platform it may not actually own? Nobody answered. Because there was no answer that saved the valuation. My father looked at me like I had humiliated him. But it was not humiliation. It was collapse. Image collapse. Control collapse. The family script failing in a room where titles meant less than paper. My mother tried once more. Nora, you are hurting your own family. I kept my voice level. No, I am refusing to rescue a lie. Then I placed the second set of records on the table. Repository history. Early architecture notes. Email records showing development before any internal employment language they were now trying to use. A clean timeline. No commentary. Just sequence. The buyer's counsel read for less than 3 minutes before closing the folder. We need to pause this closing. Evan leaned forward. For what? For ownership verification. His face changed then. Not dramatic. Worse. The look of someone who finally understands too late. Our lawyer asked if the parties could continue on a conditional basis pending follow-up review. The buyer's team did not take long. We cannot proceed with an acquisition of a company whose core technology may be licensed informally or owned by an individual outside the transaction. That was the phrase that killed it. Because informally licensed meant the company was not the engine. It was the user. And users do not sell ownership they never received. My brother turned fully toward me. You just destroyed this deal. No. I stood and gathered my copies. You destroyed it the moment you tried to sell something you never owned. My father said my name like a warning. My mother went still. Evan stopped looking at me and started looking at the buyers. He already knew his voice no longer controlled the room. That was the real end. Not the canceled closing. The moment his version stopped mattering. I picked up my bag. Then I gave him the only line he deserved. You did not lose control today. You gave it up when you chose your version over what was written. Nobody followed me out. They stayed in that conference room with their titles, their silence, and the wreckage of a company built around somebody else's work. 3 weeks later, the buyer contacted me directly. Not to reopen the old deal. To ask whether I would consider licensing the platform myself. By then, Bennett Transit Solutions was already slipping. Vendors were asking questions. Staff were updating resumes. Nothing could be patched now. The buyers had seen the truth once, and rooms like that never forget. Evan spent years carrying the name. I carried the code. That was the part he finally had to read. The company did not collapse in one afternoon. But it never recovered from that room. Once the buyers walked, the image cracked fast. 2 clients asked who actually owned the platform they had been paying to use. A regional bank delayed a credit review. One operations manager resigned within 10 days. Another updated his resume before my father could finish his emergency meeting. The story inside the family changed 3 times in 2 weeks. First, I was selfish. Then I was confused. Then I was blamed for destroying what they had spent years building. That part was convenient. Nobody wanted to say the simpler truth. They built a business around work they never legally secured. They treated access like ownership. They treated my silence like consent. They treated family hierarchy like a substitute for paper. It was not. Evan called me once after the closing failed. His voice sounded flat. No pitch. No polish. He said I could still fix this if I licensed the code back to the company and helped them hold their larger accounts together until they found another buyer. I let him finish. Then I told him no. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I was done teaching people the cost of disrespect while giving them another discount. My parents called a week later. My mother said family should not let business come between blood. My father said pride had already taken enough from all of us. I listened. Then I said the one thing they had spent years avoiding. This was never business versus family. This was truth versus entitlement. They had no answer for that. 3 weeks after the failed sale, the buyer reached out to me directly. Not to rescue Bennett Transit Solutions. To discuss licensing, acquisition structure, and product control with the person who actually owned the platform. That meeting felt different the moment it started. No one asked me to stay in the background. No one asked me to sign first and speak later. No one called me emotional for reading what was written. For the first time, I was not defending my value. I was pricing it and protecting it. They asked clear questions. I gave clear answers. They respected the line between contribution and ownership. That deal made me more money than my family ever planned to give me. But the money was not the cleanest part. The cleanest part was this. My name was finally sitting where the value was. I built a new company. Smaller. Sharper. No family titles. No borrowed authority. No soft pressure wrapped in loyalty. Just contracts, product decisions, and people who understood that trust gets stronger when ownership is clear. That was the real legacy. Not the old office. Not the silver logo on the glass. Not my brother's title. The real legacy was learning that the people closest to you can still try to live off what you created if you do not draw the line early and in writing. So here's the lesson. If someone keeps asking you to trust their version, stop listening. Ask what is signed. Ask what is dated. Ask what they avoid reading out loud. Because people who need your silence usually already know the paper will not save them. And here is the part one want you to remember. You do not owe access to people who only respect what they can take. You do not owe loyalty to a lie. You do not owe your life work to anyone just because they share your last name. Some families do not lose everything because of greed. They lose it because they mistake control for ownership. Have you ever been told to stay quiet while someone else claimed what you built? Tell me in the comments.